So our next speaker, Diogo Cosme from Salt Lake Community College. The title of his talk is The Use of OER for Proficiency-Based Spanish Curriculum.
All right, thank you. Hello, everyone. Good morning. Thanks for joining us on a Saturday morning, and welcome to my presentation, The Use of OER for Proficiency-Based Spanish Curriculum. In this talk, I'll be focusing on the use of OER for curriculum development. I will not be showcasing lots of OER platforms. Instead, I'll be talking about how integral OER was in creating a proficiency-based Spanish curriculum at my institution. And before I start, I'm going to go ahead and introduce myself a little bit more. My name is Diogo Cosme. I'm an assistant professor of Spanish and Latin American Studies at Salt Lake Community College, and I hold a PhD in Romance Languages and Hispanic Linguistics. And I specialize in second and third language acquisition of Spanish and Portuguese, education technology, and curriculum design. So now, going back to the topic today, by the end of this presentation, you will be able to list pros and cons about using OER over textbooks, implement OER in a backward design approach, and use OER as part of a flipped classroom towards proficiency, as well as get ready for an OER projects with training and platforms that are needed to implement that as a curriculum. So the key thing about my presentation is talking about textbooks versus OER, and I want to go ahead and say that there are great OER textbooks out there. I'm going to be talking about OER in the sense of creating your own material through the use of already available material online, which can also be OER textbooks, but not using them as your whole curriculum. Also, YouTube, online platforms. I'm going to be talking about designing curriculum through the creation of material with OER. And basically, I'm going to be talking about shifting from using a textbook, so just continuing the use of a textbook, to shifting to a complete OER curriculum. And some of the things that I want to go ahead and say at the beginning is that doing that project requires a lot of time and preparation. And that's something that you should do if you are a program developer, if you're a coordinator, or if your institution supports you with course releases or financial support. If that's your case, then yeah, go ahead and plan this shift, pilot it, and be ready to make some changes after you pilot it. But if you are not a coordinator, a program developer, and your institution does not support you, then maybe you should stick with the textbook a little bit longer and just make one change at a time, because this is a very great project and it requires time. So I just told you guys how much work it is. So then why did I do it? Why did I stop using textbooks, and why is my curriculum completely OER now? As many of you will guess, and you're probably hearing this the entire day today, the main reason was price. We all know that textbooks are extremely expensive, especially for lower level courses, and college can be a financial burden for students, and we don't want to create additional financial burden. So that's the main thing. However, because of price, you can also have some problems with recruitment and retention of the students, and OER can help that. It's amazing when you can go to a language fair, or you can create a flyer to share online and say, hey, come take my class, because you don't have to buy a textbook. So that draws attention, and it can also help retain some students as you create your own material, and you can make that material a little more contextualized to students, as we just saw in the last presentation. If you have female-only institution, or a historically Black institution, or a military institution, or community college, which is my case, you might adapt the OER, the material, to your audience. The other thing is the linearity. When you use it, when you create your whole curriculum over a textbook, then usually you just cover chapter 1, then chapter 2, chapter 3. You go through the linearity of that textbook. And what it causes is for a lot of instructors to feel compelled to use every single thing that there is in that textbook and not create their own materials. Just because students paid so much for that book, then I really need to use it. And what it causes is for a lot of classes not to have active learning, because a lot of activities from a textbook are very traditional. They're not, sometimes they're oral, but not exactly communicative. So having OER can also help with active learning in the classroom, once again, because you can control the homework or the preparation that students are going to be doing, and you can tailor it to the active learning in the classroom. So this is why I moved to OER. Now I'm going to talk about how I implemented this OER in the proficiency-based curriculum. And I did it through 3 steps, so three elements, which is proficiency-based, backwards design, and flipped classroom. So those are big words. Many of you are already familiar with those, but for those who aren't, I'll be addressing each of them in the following slides. But basically, I had in mind that I wanted to do proficiency-based because before that, the instructors and the students were complaining that they were not evolving in terms of proficiency, despite using textbook, studying, doing all the homework. And I did that by applying backwards design. And if you're not familiar with backwards design, you first think of the outcomes and then assessment. And the last thing you do is to think about the material. And thinking about the material to help students to reach those outcomes, I flipped my classroom. So let me go ahead and go about and talk about proficiency-based. So we need to understand the difference between a proficiency-based approach and an achievement approach. Most language programs out there, they believe they are proficiency-based because they have a beautiful statement in their curriculum, which reads, by the end of the semester, we will be able to reach novice mid or novice high or intermediate low. But the truth is, most language programs actually follow an achievement approach, which means that students go through units of content. So they go chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3, and maybe after chapter 3, they're going to be tested on the knowledge of that content. They will be tested on the irregular verbs that they study there, all the vocabulary. And so this class is textbook based because the only goal of the class is to cover chapters. By the end of the semester, you don't really need to reach a proficiency level. You just need to have read 6 chapters or 8 chapters, or however many chapters you use for your curriculum. A proficiency-based curriculum instead targets what someone can do with what they know. So we observe the progress in proficiency. So for instance, if the students are moving from speaking in a word level and moving up to the sentence level or the paragraph level. And we test what communicative functions people can perform. So instead of just all these regular verbs, let me test if the students can, for example, talk about their routine, describe people, describe places. So those are the goals of the class. And if you could guess that proficiency-based curriculum is attached to proficiency levels, then you're right. And I'm going to show you once again the ACT-FOE inverted pyramid. You might have seen this 1,000 times in your life. But if you're not familiar with how proficiency goes, novice level is connected to the word level. So students will be talking in words, lists, or phrases. with memorized language. And the way we help students move up to the intermediate, it's not by just throwing lots of tenses at them and contextualized vocabulary. It's to help them reach those communicative functions, as in start and close a simple conversation, ask and answer simple questions, and speak on the sentence level. So the way that I implemented the OER curriculum was to think about the proficiency based approach and use backwards design. So again, you first think of the outcomes, then your assessments, then your tools. So I had in mind what linguistic outcomes I wanted for my classes, thought about the assessments, but then I thought, okay, so what tools do we need to provide for them to get there? And that's exactly where OER comes in. So in a backwards design, you don't uh, think of the material, you get the material, and then you create the whole class curriculum on that material. The material is the last step. And using OER is it's really helpful for that. And let me show you how I did it in my first year Spanish year. So these are the linguistic course outcomes. I also have cultural outcomes and career writing outcomes for those classes, but I'm going to focus on the linguistic ones here. So as you can see, the outcomes are speaking discrete sentences when communicating information about yourself, your immediate environment, and also use and comprehend memorized language and short improvised phrases. So as you can see here, this is related to proficiency. So I thought of that for the course. Then for each class, I thought of communicative goals for each of them. And I'm going to bring your attention to class 5 here, which I'll be demonstrating, talking about your schedule and activities. And the communicative goal is tell the time and describe your weekly schedule, communicate your daily routine. So that's the communicative goal for each lesson. And after I created that, then I flipped the classroom. So if you are not familiar with flipped classroom approach, usually traditional classrooms follow this method of having lectures, and then students go home and they do homework activities. With flipped classroom, you get familiarized with the content before coming to class, and in the class, you use classroom activities to practice with active learning. So the thing here is that you can flip a classroom with textbooks. That's definitely possible. And as I said, there are great OER textbooks out there, but I'm going to be proposing flip the classroom, creating your own material with OER. And creating flipping your classroom with textbooks, you still have the goal the goal is still to cover chapters. You're gonna be by the end of the semester, you actually have to cover X amount of chapters, and the material ends up becoming the outcome, not proficiency. And the main problem is that usually you have pre-built activities. There are one size fits all. So the goal of textbooks is to sell, and because of that, many times you're gonna face some lessons that are not really connected to the audience that you have. So if you're in a historically Black institution, you might end up with a textbook that only presents white people or European. In case of Spanish, just European Spanish. If you are in a female-only institution, or if you have military or community college, then some of those lessons might not fit your public. But with the OER, we can align the material with the goals that we want to have. And we can control the content and with the language, and we can contextualize it to our own audience. If you have a more mature audience that want to use Spanish for their work, or to engage with their community, then it doesn't make much sense to be talking about some topics that are usually used in those textbooks that are focused on our R1 institutions where we have 20-year-old students. And also with the OER, the lessons are extremely connected to class time. We can make the vocabulary that they're learning, the grammar that they're learning, be extremely connected to class time and not waste our students' time by studying a pre-built vocabulary list or reading about texts that might not be relevant to them. This is how this is what I had in mind creating it, and now I'm going to show you what it looks like in my institution. So the first year Spanish, we have it face-to-face, hybrid, and online, and students do a preparatory homework, which is the OER part, on our LMS, which are activities that I created. And I also gather some other things that are available online there. And students also do practice activities with a free platform called Spanish Dict. There are also other platforms that you can use. I'm going to be showing some suggestions, little list with some suggestions later. And the classroom time involves vocabulary recall. We don't go over all the vocabulary, don't teach the vocabulary. Students have activities with pictures that they have to recall. We're matching. They do conversation practice and role plays. And after the class time, students do a weekly review also on Canvas, our LMS. And for the hybrid and online, they also have some weekly challenges of oral and written creative assignments. So the flipped classroom looks a little bit like this. They have preparatory homework with grammar, vocabulary, and communication. So they also see all the questions that I'm going to be asking them to ask each other. They see it in advance. And the classroom time is with active learning. And the post-classroom time, which is not necessarily part of the flipped, but because we're teaching languages, repetition is also very important. For the post-classroom, they also have OER activities with review and creative assignments. So now I'm going to show what this OER looks like in my program. And I'm going to exit my PowerPoint and go to my Canvas page here. Let me just make sure that you guys are actually seeing it. Let me share it again. So here's what it looks like. So we always start the lessons by showing why they're learning those things. And you're going to see that the content here is extremely tailored to just those outcomes. So students have to tell the time and describe their weekly schedule, communicate the daily routine. So they're going to have a regular lesson here, grammar lesson. So it's nothing extremely out of the blue. And you can say here that I have today we'll expand on expressing routines. So this is also connected to previous classes. So by having OER, you also scaffold over the module or over the semester. You don't do scaffolding just during specific lessons in the class time. And this is something that I created, but there's lots of OER textbooks or websites that have already lessons prepared. So you can just link them, or you can copy and paste and give credits, of course, and hyperlink, where you can find all the information. And this is something that students have. They get this. I also just embed some YouTube videos. And the good thing about OER too is because you can help those students that need some more time. So these are gonna have to learn how to tell time, but some students need some more time than others. So here hyperlinked. If you need a refresh on the numbers in Spanish, click here. And they're gonna be sent to this activity here where they're gonna be reviewing the numbers that they're gonna need. Some students don't have to do it, but for those who need, it's extremely important to just help to give this extra support. They're gonna have the grammar here. So in Spanish, to be able to talk about your routine, you need to learn reflexive verbs, because in Spanish, you can just say, for example, I wake up. You have to say, I wake myself up, because you can also wake up your kid, your or someone else, or your dog. So those are things that you need to be learning. And at the end here, we have some activities, and I use Spanish Dict. There are all other platforms there. This one is free. So telling the time, students will have this activity that there's an audio input and written input.
Son las 7.
So they
Hora
can
de
just
levantarme para prepararme para ir al trabajo.
so they can just click here. In the next
Las
one,
8:10.
if they get it wrong, they're gonna get
Necesitas cerrar.
immediate feedback.
Son las 8:10.
And as you can see, this is something that it's
Necesitas cerrarlo.
present also in regular
Ahora me estoy
textbooks,
haciendo
but
el desayuno.
the interface here is great and it's free. So why we're forcing students to pay $200 when we already have this type of content available. And here we have some more grammar. We do have the
Hola,
lessons here.
actions,
So a little
routines.
review on the present tense. And we also have some vocabulary practice. I'm going to show you some other classes here. So this is a class about class 16 about food. And we're going to talk about food and beverages that they like and dislike, communicating our eating habits and meals. So here we have some pictures. We talk about food, some more grammar. There's a video here. And here you have this activity, for example, at the market. So I have grammar practice, vocabulary practice, but language practice is more of a practice related to phrases that they're going to be hearing and using. So for example, here in this one, they will get vocabulary again. So salad and they
Pan.
get bread, but they will also see
Quiero una ensalada.
some phrases that they're going to be needing to use in the classroom. For class in vocabulary, this is a class that's focused on vocabulary. So I do have 39 words here, which is a long list, but that's because students come in the classroom and they're going to be using active learning. So they come and they use, they have this app open, and it's just because these are things that they might need to use in the class. Some of the words, they will not use it because, for example, maybe some people don't eat rice, so this word might be not that important for them. But and for class 19, I have here about birthday parties in Hispanic world. So I can add here some information about birthdays, how it's celebrated. I can talk about dialectal differences, talk about Venezuela, how it's different, some culture of the song Las Mañanitas, which is also common for sing happy birthday. So that's how it looks like. The students also do some reviews online at the end of the week. So these are activities that I created for them just to so there's short activities just to review the vocabulary at the end of the week. And on hybrid and online classes, they also have these activities. There are communicative. So for example, here you applied for language immersion dorm, your application got matched with an international student. So they have to listen to this audio here.
Hola,
of
me
an
llamo
international
Carmen
student.
Márquez. Soy
And they have to write a reply in Spanish and make sure that they greet, they say. So in this activity, it's of course it is a bit more work to create creative assignments, but in here we do help students practice evolving from word level to sentence level or paragraph level. So now going back to my presentation here for some takeaways. So here we have, okay, so this is what it looks like. And as you can see, the OER preparatory homework is multimedia. So there are some cases that students may even choose to read the lesson or to watch a video. Personally, me as a student, I don't like watching videos, I prefer to read it. So in some cases, students can even choose. Only has information that's going to be used in the classroom. That's extremely important. Aligns when communicative goals, and the content's not too the content is toward proficiency, not the end goal. And because of the OER preparatory homework, the homework is contextualized and seems important. So students take lots of notes, And it's important because they know that they're going to be using the same words, the same phrases that they learn there in cultural topics. We're going to be using that in the classroom. It's extremely tailored to the classroom. So students take notes, they really pay attention to everything. And because they already learned those words and phrases, they can already talk at a discrete sentence level in the classroom. We are not restricted only to the word level. Some takeaways is that textbooks can dictate the pace and the content and end up having communicative goals having a secondary role. OER allows programs, designers, and instructors to control content so it can provide inclusion and diversity, and we can contextualize material to our audience. And it's important to build an OER curriculum for busy students in mind by having bite-sized lessons so students can read that part first, and then maybe if they're doing that during their work, they can do the rest of the activities later. Multimedia, and also be mobile friendly, because lots of students do the homework during maybe their work on their commute, so it's also very important to be mobile friendly. So the last part here, before I conclude, is just to share some of the things that I think are important for those who are thinking of having OER curriculum. So some things that's the most difficult part is to change the mindset of faculty, your peers, and your students. So the first thing, it is possible, and it's for students, so it's good for them. And sometimes what you're used to do, which is just carrying a heavy textbook, is not necessarily what is good. So sometimes what we are used to do, there's great things, we should continue doing them, but sometimes it's not. So change can also be good. For students' mindset, you're going to probably get some resistance from students because they like the physical textbooks, but that's not because OER is bad. It's just because students are used to a traditional learning and which is very passive. They are used to just having a textbook, having to memorize something, and studying languages as a content, not as a skill. So they might have some resistance just because they don't know how to study using OER in a proficiency-based curriculum. So if you're going to have OER, it's very important that you teach students to also navigate your content, how they're going to find homework, what they have to do first, what they're going to have to do second, how to review for exams. Everything needs to be clear because lots of them don't know how to use it. It might be their first time. For faculty training, despite the idea that technology is the most important thing, I have found that it's not. The main trainings that a program needs is actually how to do lesson plans. It's I've noticed that lots of instructors don't really know how to create lesson plans, and they don't know how to create their own activities, especially in major languages like Spanish, because there are so many textbooks out there. People are used to just following the textbook. They don't know how to create their own activities, their own material. So that's the kind of training that's necessary, and how to do active learning so you can connect what you have with OER as a homework, and how you're going to be using that in the classroom now that you have your own material. And the technology, it's not that hard if you actually read and watch tutorials. Something that some peers, if you're something that you're going to be doing, some of your peers might be resistant towards this just because they will feel like, oh, I don't know how to do this. Oh, why don't you do it since you already know how to do it? And that's not a good excuse, because I learned how to do it because I read and I watched tutorials. So if I was able to learn, so can you. So creating this mindset. And if you're and moving to the final part, if you're looking to do this, some of the things is before you create your own material, align it to your goals, because there are already a lot of available material out there. So for grammar lessons, you can use Spanish Addict if you're in Spanish. Duolingo right now doesn't have the tool to assign specific activities, but it's going to come back. So Duolingo is great for other other languages. OER textbooks are out there too. Education Perfect is it's a low cost one. It's just $15 a year. There's a great one for all the languages. And there's this Busuu, which is also an app that you can also, it's a little bit low cost, so you can also use that for other languages. For flashcards, you can use those platforms here. Audio activities, you can use PicSay, and for video activities, Fluent Key is a great one, as well as Edpuzzle. There are already lots of available material for you to align to your goals. So summarizing and concluding this presentation. So why you should have OER, because there is no cost or low cost. It is inclusive. You can promote diversity by controlling the content you're going to be showing your students, and the homework becomes purposeful. And how to do it: first think of outcomes, then look for content. If there's not content available, then you're going to create your own content. Once you have your content, pilot the program and be ready to revisit. You're going to have to make some changes. And what to use to create this, as I said, there are lots of online platforms. There's also a great OER textbooks. Just make sure that if you're using any material, that you align the material to your goals. So think of your goals first before just using the textbook as the whole class. So this concludes my presentation today. Thank you very much, and I'll be opening for questions now.
Okay, thank you so much, Diogo. That was a really great presentation. Lots of interesting content, and we have a lot of questions here. Too many, of course, to answer because we have another talk coming up in just a couple minutes. But let me pitch a couple of these questions to you. Could you, real quickly, could you answer the technology curve, the learning curve? Because that seems to be something that people think, wow, you mentioned it a little bit, but can I do this? So what are some tips that you would give, aside from looking at tutorials, which you mentioned?
So the curve, it exists. So the most important thing, and as I said, that's something that is great and works really well for students and for the program. I have some instructors, they are doing it for the first time and they're really enjoying it. There is a curve, but the most important thing is what I said at the beginning of my presentation. This is something that not everybody should do it, because it takes time. This is something that you should do if you get support from your institution, because you have to plan ahead to do it. So the learning curve it depends on what you want to do. So I do have already a background with design and everything. So this is something that I made it look very good because I have some experience. But before this, I did it at the University of Georgia with a Portuguese program, and it didn't look as great as it looked here, but it was still effective. And it's something that you don't have to learn to do everything at the first time that you do it. So maybe just do it. Start just showing some. Just start with the lesson part, and in one semester. In the next semester, maybe you create some activities, and then the next semester you create some other creative assignments. And for learning curve, it really depends on where you stand, but lots of institutions also have e-learning a department that they could be helping you.
So thank you. I think you're absolutely right. You know, you don't have to do everything, and Diogo has been working on this for many years. So this it's a huge undertaking. So start small and work up. So I have a question here about it. It seems that you're sending your students to a lot of external websites, and that's wonderful. They're all open. But how do you know that they're actually doing the work there? Do you have any kind of, is there any way of checking to see that the students are doing the homework?
Yes. So if you're going to be using Duolingo, for example, you have Duolingo for schools, you can track what students do. With Spanish Dict, you can also do it. In my case, it kind of depends because I work with adults. I like to put a lot of content, and I let them choose how much they're going to be using, because some people need more time than others. For some people, just reading it is enough. For some people, just doing the activities is enough. For some people, have to do both. The way to control if they're doing, in some of the cases, if your class is actually active, you're gonna see in the classroom who did the homework and who didn't. Because in the classroom, I do not teach vocabulary. I don't teach every single thing, every
Right.
single sentence. So the students, they feel the first week, maybe they struggle a little bit because they're not used to classes like this. So then they feel like, oh, okay, I actually have to do the homework, otherwise I can't survive. My peers can really do it well. However, I've had some classes that students didn't do it, so I started tracking it. So Spanish Dict, for instance, does have the ability to create your own classroom and track your students' progress. For all the languages, I do suggest Education Perfect, which I'm using with the online program. With Education Perfect, you can also track, and again, it's very cheap. It's $15 for an entire year. So that's also a low cost possibility for people, but you can check, yes.
Okay, thank you so much for your answers and for your presentation, Diogo. And